Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme.
Good morning.
Morning.
Nice to see you again. So yeah, every day is a special day. So see you. I'm happy to see you, everyone. Today, I'm going to talk about 다 삼보주비 몰람 생가서 제탄 군케 가추 강티마 티스치 엔도버레 텐디트네 다티마 준투치 상마다 complete 마자와드 자창 마자와드 드니지 다 거카신 돌로치니 마직 로야레스.
So, as most all of you were present during the winter teachings, where we were discussing this beautiful King of Aspiration prayers, the prayer for noble, excellent conduct, and we weren't able to go entirely through the prayer. So our objective will be to continue teaching on the prayer, to pick up where we left off, and to continue until we complete the whole, until we've gone through it entirely. So we'll just see how that goes, week by week, and it just takes as long as it takes.
텐디 다 제탄 가서디 가장 콘슈바는 일이 몰람 세야디 뱀마시게 개침보리 텐디 다 제탄 가서 어찌 담배 기초로 세나리 야면나 다 달바탐진 침배 콤파야 로버치가라 지 칼세고리 상보초라양 다지 가서 레당 가와 지 제와 망보니 고몰람 따샤베기 네파 요리 이나양 태단냠드 테네지 가서 그 줄래양 지 뇽 몬바 와다 tindijikke jianchini yang 담배 기초 로버치가 왔다네 지 화투주 버스너리 지 continuation 양 지마토비아 와다 진짜 망보지 연구요래 티엔디 다 몰람 세안디 다 뭐네 지네지 뭐네 담배 기초네 지 로버치가 왔다 양지 콘에 콘드로 tindijikke 다 페리아키 에다 락자 세너리 칸다리아 프로텍션 로지 차디요레스.
So we also, before, when we began these teachings, we spent some time discussing just how important the role of aspiration prayer is in our Dharma practice. That, aspiration prayers are really very special and very important. And they are, this together with the accumulations and purifying obscurations, it really becomes one of the necessary conditions for reaching, the state of liberation and awakening. And so really, as a very integral part of our Dharma practice, it's necessary to continuously recite powerful, heartfelt aspiration prayers. So this, together with many lifetimes of accumulating the virtuous causes, virtuous karma, and purifying purifying obscurations, then even still, it is possible, with all, even eons of
lot of positives would you guys, but also this other hand is just
But even still, even though we may have accumulated, say, eons of positive karma or virtue, it's still possible that one could become derailed, on one's path. It's still possible that due to the conditions that cause us to give rise to very powerful afflictive emotions, that we engage in some, really heavy negativity, heavy accumulation of negativity, and so on. There are all sorts of conditions that can cause our path of Dharma practice to become obstructed. There are many conditions that become the cause for obstacles to arise. And aspiration prayers are really like our protection, like our kind of like our guarantee, or our protection, like our passport, that will ensure that our Dharma practice continues to increase, that we don't, that we don't fall victim to conditions that could cause us to go astray.
Like for instance, spending a daily practice that was some bina every day, every moment la up and down the way, chavi or sta, chingas morning the window, tanga gomji jagos, Nyamneji chigo yang, some giori, yin yang, kochi tawa after 1 hour later, yang, tinnitus ching doba me wonder woji, to su me wonder woji, kochi, level yorwa. What that tindino which is some tambina, tinnitus, message kinala yang, tendo, tinia java chimaina yang, tendo, or level gorwa, tindi, tinnitus yang, tarwatam jinching be compound tobia say at the tar and bondoji, chando is. Tendi ta tendi je ke mayung ya ke chi tu la o ta chi tu la ta na zu molam se ya ke chin bo res tendi te na yi ki ta
So, for instance, even if you just think about your own experience and daily practice, and how much, how many kind of up and downs there are, even just in the course of a day, or how much, say, for instance, in the morning, we may feel really inspired to practice, or we think, or just from session to session, our mind can change so so much. In the morning, we can feel really inspired to practice, and then only maybe just 1 hour later, that inspiration is no longer there. We feel kind of uninspired, or we don't really feel like practicing. And so if it can be this way just in the course of a few hours, how much more so, throughout the entire course of our lifetime, and how much even more so throughout the course of many lifetimes. So in this way, because of the uncertainty of conditions, then, the final result or liberation can really become very sort of far off. And so in order to ensure that this doesn't happen, that this doesn't occur, then to regularly make heartfelt aspiration prayers is very important.
어다 대나 이게 다 제가 저 추세야 되게 다 통다로 하고 송고와 하고 송고요래 되는다 제가 추 냠냠 치와라 당보 토삼금 솜즈리드네 지 당보 토바 디게 지추 디게다 통다 양 공발라소바 용구요래 이 대인도 얘네양 다지 하고 세야다 아마도 배 하고 세야들라 되네 고 치탕 나 뭐뭐요래 다 제가 가서 지다 롭점 로직라 고치게 배나 랭귀지 도와 양나 배 개개 양면은 다고 doctrine 배차 history 트리직 때네 가서 하고요로 와 이내야다 디 이게 가르스나 지금 다르마 오늘 추지 meaning 오지 하고버레베스는 하고요 말에 제가 나이게 고지 공도자 되지 history 오지 그 하고원 오지 이렇게 거다 동양원에 대해 자디요 말와 디엔드들이
디에 보고마서 The aposhira kuma some history hakoyala.
or Penachana history no Hakovina. Ina ko tsagle tene jitanta history no Hakoyo ina ya chungone tonda ota chuti na tonda Hakosong sena koyo maris history no ko zamji.
So chugi history.
Yeah, the Hakoyo marwa. Penasanji jumne tambi chu tonda ngoma karimba tadong Hakoyo maris. tonda chu ngone Hakover chigala kandiji gugosna then contuba na yere tene jik sonam yapten ro sonam yapten 용국 요래 대가 나기다 조사 드바 잡을라지 됐든 조사 소놈 사베 라 때네 때네 고지 니마직 다 주디 돈 하고 요래스 디하 거야 될까서나 지 소르와 몰람 대바 이치 틴디 주치야 뭐 지금 좀네 고하 거야지 마토베게 다 메지글라 노 돈다 테리 세야노 지게 돈네 고하 고는 이거 말이스
So when it comes to understanding the Dharma, we really have to practice. It necessitates engaging in Dharma practice. And
general what generally yoris what to some gomsom siaji yoris.
And in general, there are these three aspects to engaging in Dharma practice, the three aspects of study, contemplation, and meditation. And together, and in order to sort of have to have a general view, or to have a kind of overall, a general understanding or an overall understanding of the Dharma, then it's important to understand the language. It's important to have understanding of doctrine, to really have some scriptural understanding, history, and so forth. But none of these can, and you need to have like a teacher, you have to have a skilled teacher that you rely upon. But to really understand the meaning of the Dharma, you can't really understand through these sort of intellectual through the intellectual capacities, through understanding these things doesn't necessarily help when it comes to really understanding the meaning. So for instance, if you understand the history, you may have a thorough understanding of history, but that doesn't really at all help you to understand the actual meaning. In order to really understand the meaning, you have to have a lot of merit. You have to have the support of merit, and you have to really purify the obscurations. So these two, of gathering the accumulations and purifying obscurations. And then based on having accumulated a great deal of merit, then one day our understanding starts to naturally dawn. There's understanding that occurs, and this understanding is assisted, by these qualities such as supplication and faith, confidence or trust, and aspiration prayer. And understanding can really only come from within. There's nobody who can tell you it is like this, and explain it to you, and then based on that explanation, you understand. It isn't that, like, nobody can really actually show it to you. You have to come to understand for yourself.
What that thing, not a tiny consumer, no ye, and not that, Molam. Tigandan yiki, Tandalabudo to me, what I got to dig 9 sagodes, 100,000 sagodes, Jikarina Tajik, Tanga Mambo, sagodes, Labudor. What a tea cousin Masavina. Tineko Yagi could do it, me to your man. Talk about the jet to your man, shoot about it, I'll go to your man. What that in the Jibu, Tanato Mombo Haku, Benedict to Miliki, Namtangi, and Jignaruna Tata, the Mambo Yorwa. Tindin, Tatoti, Pajik down with Gala.
So the Namtardi to Nangshin, Gande Nangshin Bay Sondru Chimbo.
no ta kawa je go
Mhm.
kawa mo bo je yo de ka yi ji ne yi na ta to de samo dang da ma chama 얘기 지기다 history로 samo dang bi na 지 인식 미니 꽤 책들은 제히 자면 때는 지금도 가 지금요 말이야 제가 저기 저기요 말이야 오늘 지금 가시겠다 배는 들어오는 있는 게 좀 강하게 메이스라고 봐. 다 간다 강이면 책이 이렇게 잡고 말이야. 이네요. 코직 파이케 강사 코란티 냠랭 대바 이치 존두 되네. 그가나 이 몰람디 주지 미웅비 qabla 되네 지 오늘 다네 코란 빼지. 니마 샤로니 이거 되네. 지운 거요. 배나 차샤비는 내 돈으로 이제 삼는 당비는 다 장래 뭔가 좀 내도도 직답이는 출로 진짜 뭐다지는 싫어지요 말이야. 얘네야 고치야 고코랑 컨디션도 지금 좀비가로 아주 취향 뭐 당연 뭐지미나 또 탈람은 샤로 탈람은 샤고요 탈람은 샤려야 돼 고배나 차죠 주소지나 샤고요 얘네 주소지에 나나 이 메소드 샤워를 샤요 말이야 티뱀 버리거든 그럼 빼 고코라 주체 마부 직초지 두두 마부 시주지 버리거든 얘네야 그 두초지 마부진 거네 타마디고 들미비 두초 지금 뭐는 다 소놈께 또 모든 용도가 그 계획이 지은 거다. 그 휴직 변내 돈으로 인지고서 계획 거야 이거 말고 그거는 지은 거로. 어디 뒤에 맞아 추그 통하고 세야 하는 거지. 공원에 추그 통하고 세야 돼. 다 되게 고요해.
So when we, we have all of these practices where we, have to do a whole lot of accumulations, like, 100,000 accumulations and so forth. And the reason for this is, that the more that we do, if we don't really apply ourselves very much, then we're not going to have any result. In order to have a result, there has to be full dedication. One has to completely, one has to really persevere. One has to fully apply oneself. Otherwise, there's no understanding that will develop. And these, such examples are exemplified by the great masters such as Jetsun Milarepa and Naropa. In reading their life stories, we see, how it is like the degree of dedication, the degree of perseverance and diligence that is really needed, or that this really requires. And so um, other than that, actually, there isn't really so much, explanation through words, that these, for instance, like even Tilopa said something along the lines of, there's nothing that I can actually show you. And so,
teach you.
or teach you. And so therefore, um, what it really requires is dedication on the part of the practitioner and complete confidence, or complete sort of trust, faith and reliance, and aspiration prayers. With these qualities, then it becomes like a natural ripening that occurs in the mind stream, just like as naturally as, the shining sun. And so, for instance, if you plant a flower, if you plant a seed for a flower, and all the conditions are there for it to grow, you have fertile soil, you have water, you have sunshine. And with time, then that flower will blossom, the flower will grow.
But along the way, pe kale yo wa samsung to chuma ta yo re samsung ni ma mo ta yo re ji ko khari ne ji successful hita chaga pe kha ko wa go bi yo re samsung pe 근데 진 이는 양 그 뒤지 라옹 비 qabla 되네 고 베데 karmaji no chudu ji ki no ko ji ong go wa o in a condition to ngato ji manzong ga lo tene samsung chulona yang chuma target yang chunyong target 다 고집에 양나 차 target yang tang target 다 되니 진짜네 고배 두도좀 보지 원로 그래서
However, along the way, sometimes it's difficult. Our efforts may not feel so successful. Sometimes we maybe don't water enough, or maybe sometimes we overwater. Maybe there's not the appropriate amount of sunlight. There needs to be more, fertilizer added to the soil and so forth. And so, as long as all the conditions don't really come together, then there can be, periods where there doesn't seem to be much progress, or we're not quite getting it right. But then when all the conditions are there, and of course, it doesn't happen just immediately. We can't plant a flower and expect it to grow, just like in an hour or two. But so it may take some time, but then when the conditions are all there, then actually the blossoming happens fairly quickly. So due to the power of merit and karma, there is the blossoming can happen, really sort of all at once. Though it hasn't really happened all at once, although it may, it actually has happened over this longer period of time.
어다 대가 나이 땅에라 뭐 대바서야 되니 빠지 땅도 대바서야 돼 남바 상지게 대바 뭐 라파요 대반들이 지고에 대바 저너를 처음에 대바서야 간데 임베지 하 고기요 하 고기요 이내야 대바 틀라지 제스리기 생기된 제스야도 백하고 봐 뒤에다 빼나 자샤분의 지침을한다고 돼 타마디 다 빼다 거지 상지로 집에 가라 테니 다 거라 대바지노 오다가 대바지에서 송을 테니 다 대바 간디지지 열라마 테니 다 마르베게 퀄리티 샤다 지 통통이거다 까디 간디지임바스 타라탐진 쳔베게 세야게 선제 고마 세야데 다 짜침보 간디지임바데 하고 비거와 테니지 고음베 가라 다고 대바지요레고 블로존 거라 대바딘지미니 오다가 대바고도 라마 대바고도 깨쳐 요마레 고 코라라이 기직 당길라임바 컨디션지 초비나 kummeto pe ning jiu pe color for pe chalami ji 샤온 거와 어다 드나이 지 샤온 거래서 어 드가 나이 지 담배 기 추스야 데 통다디 지 땅아 저지 깔레 지합네 로와 존류 치네 몰람 지합네 지 용비 까라 타마디 되는지 땅아 저 추 통다로 오지 다 하고 온 거다 차라 람지 어다 디니 못해 가서 다 understanding dharma chagorwa
So crucial in this equation is the mind of faith. And so to have, so it's actually not so easy to have really uncontrived faith arise, a really true faith. So for instance, even Jetson Milarepa, actually, it was closer to his actual awakening, his actual enlightenment, that he really acknowledged that he had truly given rise to faith for the first time. And in that experience, he saw all the qualities, of his teacher Marpa, understanding him to actually be the Buddha in person in a way that he hadn't, prior to that time. And so in this way, really, faith becomes like the condition for this blossoming to just unfold, this blossoming to occur on its own. And so when the flower is ready to bloom, the flower blooms, in all its just extraordinary colors and, really beautiful, vivid, perfectly, just perfect flower. And so in the same way, when understanding arises, it's like the understanding of the Dharma just unfolds naturally, spontaneously. And this is like the culmination of all that diligence and aspiration prayers and devotion that has been cultivated over time. And then when the blossoming unfolds, there's just understanding that occurs almost as though it were all at once. There's just clear and perfect understanding of the Dharma, like this blossoming, like the vivid blossoming of a perfect flower.
Understanding what Dharma.
And then you understand what you said it in English, yeah, and then there's just full understanding of the Dharma.
어다 들어나 이게 땅아서 담배 추우세요. 다 배나차 샤위나 아서 티파 침부 그나네 지다 초현시디디 general 참바스야 닝기스야 현변스야디 있지 원에 배치면은 majority 참여게 오다 지 understanding 도지 차리요래다 공고 초반다고지 오다데 텐디리샤 참바스야 텐디리샤 닝기스야 텐디리샤 텐디치 제국도 선배지 요래 이내양 체 드리지가 랩요래서나 랩요 말이스 다티 랩버 치발라 양타게 콘티우바나기리 오네 직소놈 자친부 초 자친부 뭐놈 자친부 튼디지 따네 드네 니마치 땅원이 지니 참바 세야 닝게 세야 되다 지금 뭐니 샘게 땡니 코로나다 지금 레본 거로 와 대니까 대양고 지금 그 take understanding 그 주요 말이스.
And so in general, as we practice the Dharma of the Great Vehicle or Mahayana Dharma, where there is the emphasis on the precious qualities of love, compassion, and the mind that wishes to benefit others, so like the majority have a pretty feel as though, there's a clear understanding of these, like there's understanding there, but really not, if we really examine actually this real understanding has not yet arisen. And when it does arise, due to the power of merit, due to the power of, having gathered the accumulations and vast aspiration prayers, then there's really a love and compassion unlike anything that we have experienced before, that really arises from the very depths of our being.
대중구도 되게 예만 같이는 뭐지다 거란치다 양라마 양레 되네 고다 지 갈세 그래 지 거란양 되네 지금 뭐 로톱 첨부 어로와 로톱 첨부지 지 갈세 그다 지 섬진 그 통로 tindichiya yunguyorwa ji koranya dangzi chi jo nga ji gu sam gu yo mari yin ya tini ta korai kitan nam ta nang tini ji do wa tini konso ji ta ti ta nigun kala no sa gwa sunday la konso ti kala nyam sa ya no yo sare kala nyam da sa tene korang so tis ngo himbal da lama dang to ta lama dang ma ji spombo wa tzu nyam de tini kala da sa ti ga la tini tzu tini le tini jik ti sta korang so ka yo mar wa pim ma si bi ka ni chimbuji yo re tini du tini ti sta la gu yo sar wa pe jam se ya te pe du bo yimba ta ngone du bo wa sang ji temba yang ye yo re tini ta 베케 루크 가나 지기 루당 셈닝게 토라다 지 강에 섬지미 쳐와 요르와 다 지금 뱀베 체소 효원로야 루 효원로야 tindi지 용구 요르와 tindi지 유에 까올라테네 지다 tindi지 다 직자면 컨디션 쟁고와 카티 컨디션 자르고와 팅도테네 지 코란스타 개천로트가 슬럽고 요사로와
Jami Gande Zimgon?
How to defeat, you know.
Oh, okay. So the Song Kang Nang La Yu Bei Ka La Dia Nam Sin La Kyo Re. So for instance, with the example of someone like Garchen Rinpoche, who actually even prior to this, he was really such an extraordinary Lama and very courageous, and he worked, for the benefit of others without any, without it being motivated by self-interest at all. And in his life story, there is some, where it mentions when they were in prison, and they, it would come time, for the midday sort of rations of food to be distributed, and they were, there in the prison cell together, and
yeah, so this sort of like, I think only they are gathering sort of like Sunday during lunch time, and then sort of like discussion what this, situation and conditions, and everybody talking about, really, of course, really difficult situations. So also the majority is really angry to Chinese government, so then discuss just kind of quietly about how we can fight, how this defeat, Chinese and so on. So just talking. So that time is the Campbell missile. So he is really interesting their conversations. So because there is many, they are all probably like Tibetan leaders and the lamas. They have basically have educations, and then the Campbell missile, I think he is not interesting in their conversations. So then, okay, so do you finish?
I think you pretty much said what I had
That
written down.
that Nimaji the song do that Tinido Chita Chitan the long story in a Jatanta and the Inchina Yorwa Solona and Tina Yori Tindu. In that Tama de Tini Tangajan which Correndo was on the Bambina Yang, Tangi Contu and Nagiri, one corner Gerk Danzindo, your Marie Coran, Tingola, Corangan Chimiran Buchiri, Coran Kangajan Buchi Coran Keta, father Ritasoganlagic, Dharma instruction, how could we already Chalachimbu Katone, this Gunguyori, Yinayang, Kota Cho Shenshel, some not on big Latini, Karsakta, Jam, the bear, Dana Wachita, only the Nijikope. Tahor semdi go sarwa kongro pe sabio sare.
So then yeah.
The sure da. So yeah, that is so one day this Kimbo missile so really kind of yes, Garcian, which one hand is yes, he has the received teachings, and also I think he's Garchimi Rinpoche and his father, so he just actually practiced Mahamudra and so on. But this like the Kimbo missile, so not really interesting. So then later on, so he has the discussions.
Kimbo Munsa wasn't interested in the discussions.
Right. And then Garchen Buchi, so like kind of, I think they received a lot of teachings. The one day, the Kimbo Muse said to Garchen Buchi is, okay, now, if there or lamas or disabled. Like for instance, I am lama, maybe you are disabled. So situation comes like future, you listening, okay?
Mhm.
So one day somebody killed me, right? And came up Mr. Said. But you, if you are my disabled, you're not angry,
Even if one day I get like killed in front of you.
right? So reason is there is this long term, the causal conditions. So he said, we know, not now, we don't need to angry to China.
Chinese.
There is causal conditions. And also like Chinese army, they have like orders, like dictators order, but there's really the motivation they want to kill. So, so that moment is Gartian Bush understanding immediately how powerful and love and compassion. He totally changed it. So I said before, sort of we understand, yes, love and compassion. We said all mother sentient beings all the time, But that moment, he understand. So, so I saying this Dharma understanding is this take time. So sometimes we say, okay, love and compassion and these things sort of like we understanding, but like how we quickly change, immediately understand. Immediately understand means, or the deeper understanding means, there is no questions. And there's no longer too judgmental and angry. So totally stops. So that way is the way understanding. So sometimes Dharma understanding means, oh, what is understanding? But this understanding is really need through the practice. Take time. So also Dharma understanding, or a same way in the realization, same way. So ta tindi ta tindi indu ta tindi ji thobar chi wala ko nga so ji randomly o ta ji o nga so ji lam sang ji thom ro ya ji yo ma tindi indu ta tu chung gu yo wa ko mo lam ja gu yo re ro mo lam ja se ya di ko mo lam ja ni yin di ko sem de kale ji ko sem thama ji le ya yo re tindi pe na cha sha wi na nga so the ro wa pe 직샘 기댕라 마치지 당일라 임바 배참반 인제 장여 선자지 하 고구 요리라 양타 단양한테 빼 지금 믹스 히우지 배 지금도 가스나 잠반 인지에게 그 미빠지 랩통 거 말와 어떻게 되더니 그 칼레지 장온 거 가라 되네 골라서 달려 온 거래스.
So as that is the case, we shouldn't sort of have an attitude thinking like, oh, randomly someday we're just going to wake up, we're just going to understand, that, or some sort of
Maybe possible.
expectation or some sort of expectation that things are going to happen quickly, because it really takes time. It really takes time, and it takes consistent dedication to the practice. And so, gradually, the qualities of Dharma develop. It's a gradual process, and our understanding becomes clearer over time, gradually. And so, but as long as, for instance, we have some degree of understanding, we understand love and compassion, we maybe cultivate some love and compassion, but it's mixed. It's not really so pure because of all it's mixed up with the mind of self-grasping and all the defilements. And so the real power of love and compassion has yet to be seen. We haven't really accessed that.
어다 대인도 대가 나 이따 가서 데려대. 지금 원람 시야디다. 가상 쉬고래. 대인다 기타 원람 시야디 지 양가서 지금 뭐지 종성어 지부케 치트 양 말이라 대가 나 이게 지다 고송보 지부 치트 말이 대인다
미직 종성어?
기타가 좀 원람 동람은 뭐지 종성다 원람 동래 랍그와 야 tindiya mares tinda ko ji sombo inare hyo inare tindi ke toni tindi nga ta molam yag yores.
So aspiration prayers are such an important part of the practice, and they're not just to be relegated to, when somebody has died, and then we recite the aspiration prayers, or they shouldn't just be something, that we do on those sort of designated special days or times, but actually really to incorporate it into our practice, so that we really do, recite aspiration prayers regularly is really important.
오다 디니 디가 나이다 nga 정원이 달로 클로 세나리다 직 로니 토니 휴 강라다 고 강에 mambo직 튀요레 디가 나이다 뭐니 단 mambo직 쉐요르와 디 쉐요르 이나다 직 메토도 쉐송들라베 직 맞아 심티 나오다 동년도 치바 잠지 고파기라 휴월이야 그냥 돌아야 강해요 말이 이는요 고지다 맞아 지 토바데 가리요스나 지금 뭐네 학성 넘버 타비가 고니 직트솔이야 직 베나탄나다 맞아 배용요래 가서는 단단가 직 디스커션 몰람들 디스커션 장소 년기요래 다 맞아 디스커션 지요와 든디게 직 추지게 진압 추지게 느바 달라 가서는 땡땡 콘솔 펜토 통그레스.
So this year, or 2020 in particular, has been a really difficult year. There have been a lot of challenges and many people who have died, so many people who have died due to the pandemic. And so, if we feel really worried and kind of have a lot of angst and suffering, or worry about this, that doesn't really do any good. There isn't any real benefit that can come from that. But when with a really pure intention, with a kind of a pure mind, when we engage in Dharma, for instance, even just sharing in these discussions, listening to these discussions, engaging in this discussion on the topic of the Dharma, on the topic of aspiration prayers, then due to the blessings and power of the Dharma, there's real benefit in that.
어다 디니다 대치리 된다 가장 가서 되니 마송도 좀 네 가장 같은 데 라로와 레당 용모 뉴지 레남라 토싱기 텐도와 남스양 기타라 빼모 춤을 잡아 힘 년다 남고 도버입니다 지시야 되다 가서 가장 안로 심바레스.
So where we left off in the aspiration prayer with the end of the at the end of the winter teachings was with this verse, may I traverse all my lives in the world. Let's see. May I traverse all my lives in the world free of karma, afflictions, and interfering forces, just as the lotus blossom is undisturbed by the water's wave, just as the sun and moon move unhindered through space.
다 이제 당가서다 당기 콘티가 나이리 당가서 직탱킨디 키나나더니 다 뉴몬바 송래 뉴몬바 레메게와다 레메게와 조데 레메게와 쭈라레디요레 어다 디게 지게다 디 레테 두 세야데 카로스나 강해지 떼고레 레텔라 사니 뉴몬 메게비키 레사샤웨키 텔레테네 티네 지 텔라 가서 둥에용거레 oda dunge tada tamchi tine chik thor hin sidi chik ta o phagi la thoro chi indela thoro chi no tindi mayin ba tine chik do simchen tada tamchi tine chik tanda mege wikle tikin digu dunge tada tamchi pe thor shos mona dia bare tine tiga na yi ke chik ta tani nga sun tiyo me to pe man dam de jeba na yi chik nga sun purwe na la jebi na yang ko tindi je ke chik nyong ba maguwa leji maguwa duji maguwa oda tindi je tine me to pe ma dam de jeba na yi dam je tumi maguwa tindi je yong shos
So so here and another so an alternative would be, may I be freed from karma, harmful emotions, and the work of negativity, and act for all beings in the world, just like a lotus flower to which mud and water cannot cling, or the sun and moon that course unhindered through the sky. So here the aspiration then is to be free from all of these karma, negative karma, the afflictive emotions and obscurations that all, and in fact, that we may be able to bring limitless benefit to all sentient beings, and not sort of a benefit that is sort of like, oh, may these over here be benefited and may those over there be benefited, but a benefit that is really all pervasive and completely unbiased, that the benefit is that our aspiration for benefit is so all encompassing and vast that it includes all sentient beings without exception. And the aspiration is that we may be like a lotus flower. So this translation says something like undisturbed by the waves, but actually the more literal translation is like a lotus flower to which mud and water cannot cling. So just like a lotus flower is born out of the mud, it rises up out of the mud, and yet its blossom is this extraordinarily beautiful blossom that is completely untainted by the mud from which it has grown. So in the same way, the aspiration is to be like this lotus flower who, even though we move amidst samsara, we are untainted by the faults of samsara. We are not stained by the obscurations of karma and afflictive emotions.
Tiga na jita ninda namka thobar mi dar ji su du jita ji nima thang dawa ta so ki ji simchen ke thong chi ba tala ji tho de ya da wo dang tini ji ga he ki ya sa chang ga hi nima sha de wa kai hi ma sha wa tindi me wa tiga na ji ki nima dawa khorang khang wo ro sam na tang o ji nyere wo ta nga de le nima sha gi ngan de le nima sha gi me se ya tindi me wa 아워다 대나이게 지 심chen 탐지 기통 니만다베 기통 지와 나히 심chen 탐지 기통이지 나랑 마음 발라 되네 티디진 종쇼 송고 다 되는데 저 갈스나 지 미게위게 초로지 선마 담비나 되네 직다 아세야 유기 휴글라 고미게와데 효 친구 용구여와 이나야 나도 다지 몰람 야야다 개와 두야다 근데 인디 근데 녜치기 요스 녜 몰람 야기 녜 심지한 통나 치기 녜 창조 심발라 발라기 녜 냠래 치기 있어야지 다고 나고 그거레스.
So then as it says, or the sun and moon that course unhindered in space. So or just as the sun and moon move unhindered through space. So again, this is like, as was explained before, having this completely impartial mind, or this completely impartial intent of benefit that shines everywhere, spontaneously and naturally, achieving the benefit of beings, just like the sun and the moon. The sun and the moon, the sun doesn't choose, where, upon whom it will shine. It doesn't, sort of withdraw its light from some beings over here and intentionally shine its light on other beings over there. But it just shines, lighting up the entire earth, illuminating the world for all beings. And so in the same way, when we really are able to achieve the welfare and benefit of others, this benefit is completely impartial and all pervading. There's no sort of intentionality behind, who will be benefited or who that benefit, that will be, sort of not given to. There's no partiality whatsoever, and it is just completely spontaneous and all pervasive. And so so the aspiration here is, may I be able to achieve the benefit of all sentient beings in this way, the impartial benefit of all beings, like the sun and the moon, unhindered in space. And so ordinarily, all when we are motivated by the mind of self-interest, when we're operating from, I need to, may I do this and may I do that. So ordinarily, our self-interest is one that just creates nothing but negativity. But here, actually, in the aspiration prayer, through this skillful practice of aspiration prayer, we're taking, sort of that fixation on the self, the aspiration of the I, and we're actually sort of skillfully replacing, the mind of self-grasping with these really sort of exalted aspiration prayers that, that are aimed toward benefiting sentient beings and practicing the Dharma.
다 디휴라 같아래 현기 초나 초나 제잠바스 년송동을 랍드 히워치 대화다란 도와 궁구진 도와 탐지라는 펜버지스.
So then the next verse says, may I ease the suffering in the lower realms and in the many directions and dimensions of the universe. May I guide all wanderers in samsara to the pure bliss of awakening and be of worldly benefit to them as well.
다 디인도 태종래 현기 초나 초나 제잠바 종래. 대화 현기 초나 초나 제잠바스. 다 현감 태종 현기 총 이렇게 야친 보러와. 현기 총남 총나 치잠바스 총나 치잠바스 다 기타 현인조래다 현들라 배나 현감라고다 현감 현기 총탕 저기다 양총으로 와 양총 써야 돼. 근데 총남들이 다 가장 컨트리인 바 아직.
Wait, chun is kare?
총들이 양총 체중 사이즈. 얘네들 디칼라고요래 세나 저기 가장 쉬운 바 배는 저기 자체쇼 디 가레세나 되네 현감 써야 돼. 현감 써야 돼. 거기 실린데와 남간나기 자체보래 자체쇼 들리 자체야지 요 말와. 배는 가장 장지에서는 거보다 가서 라비스 말인데 장한테 가봐들어와. 어디들이 마야 충쇼데 가장 가서 눈텐 재미 써야지 로송. 와다 딘디 자체쇼데 현감으로 와. 현감 대종 현감 총 배다 현감 써야 돼. 그 시당 한지야 매죠. 다 차디요래. 그가 나이양 현감 찍마인 바송다 초남 지리다 간다 초 간디요나 샤리요나 로요나 노비요나 장요나다 간디요나 초주나나 드니 나서다 만두와 현감지 요 말이스 배자침보래 zon래
So, so it says, may I ease the suffering in the lower realms and in the many directions and dimensions of the universe. So actually in the Tibetan, the first line is the second one of in the many directions and dimensions of the universe. So, or another translation would be throughout the reach and range of the entire universe. So Shingi Chun, which is the first one, is saying sort of this referring again to this size, sort of the kind of largest unit of size, which is a shinkam or pure realm, a Buddha field. So there's no sort of greater dimension of space than, or range of space than like the field of a pure realm, the range, the entire range or expanse of a pure Buddha field. So this is like kind of the largest unit of space, and then, as we also mentioned earlier in the teachings, that the smallest unit of space would be, say, for instance, like a partless particle or an indivisible atom, and so this is this vast unit of space, the pure Buddha field, and then the second part of it, which is Choknam, and which is actually in all directions. So in all of the directions, meaning, you know, all of the 10 directions. So it's not just one Buddha field, but limitless Buddha fields. The most, the sort of the vast, the most expansive, sort of the most expansive expanse, which is really conceivably possible, or inconceivably maybe possible.
that tea that janchong tea chejung sekigla janchong tindi chejung sekigla 당에 뭐니 지는 년송송 들리 야충그러와 얘네 양다 고 선반도 지지오다 든나 얘기해 되네 백년송 동이라 희와 지기 해서 다 제당 년송지도 맞다 제당 년송송 슬라고요와 얘네 양다티 저 체쇼섬 방거로 마도 베게 단도와지도 그더니 수인은 요 되네 든디 체중 들어가서 제기다 빼 세일인데 바지 그더니 니다 년송 그 등에 다 간다 짬마 짱짱 그런 년송 그 등에 되대 랍드 희와치 스미가 랍드 희와치야 그더니 느파지 용쇼 스미 되네 제기다 년송 그 등에 다 담지를 빼 희와치기 예송데
So then it says, I shall pacify completely the suffering of all the lower realms, or here it says, may I ease the suffering in the lower realms. So here, kind of, if we're first bringing our mind to this really vast expanse of all Buddha fields throughout the 10 directions, and then sort of prior to conceiving that, then the 3 lower realms may have felt sort of overwhelmingly vast, but actually, you know, that is relatively small in comparison to sort of this immensity of all the Buddha fields throughout the 10 directions. And so thinking of all the beings, you know, suffering in particular in the 3 lower realms, but all of the suffering of the 6 realms of sentient, you know, all the 6 classes of sentient beings who suffer in innumerable ways, you know, due to karma and afflictive emotions. And so the aspiration then is to completely pacify the suffering of all of those beings throughout space and time.
어떻게 나기 기대네 대화다라 도와 끊고 진 손다지 나가서 넘주디 세미시와 동아르가 유다 대화 조직 대화다 리베주던 덴버 조직 손도테네 태나기 테네 rowa tamchi zita nyering tang jitang tsemi he dinang ta ko yores.
So then it says, may I guide all wanderers in samsara to the pure bliss of awakening and be of worldly benefit to them as well. So actually contained within this verse is, the practice of the four immeasurables. So, may beings have happiness in the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering in the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is free from sorrow, and may they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. So that is really what is being generated here, are the altruistic intentions of the four immeasurables.
Next one. Next one, Changchop Juba, Yons Zoji Jing, Changchop Juba, Yons Zoji Jing, Simjian Dark Jutang, Tumbanju, Sambo Juba, Tani, Rap Dongjing, Momo Kalwa going to Jubanjurs.
So then the next verse says, may I practice constantly for eons to come, perfecting the activities of awakening, acting in harmony with the various dispositions of beings, and showing the ways of a bodhisattva.
Tinita Changchop Juba, Yons Zoji Jing, so that Nieke, so that Naran getting Changchop Roa, Beta, Momo Changchop Simba, and Juba Changchop Simba, Tini. Changchop simbi kita joba parchi thogla so wata ta tamchi ni labgis laba za mazi be kita chi tis lab hyane tindi mayimba be complete do chi nga zo chi jins tindi ji ta ngek be ta changchop sim derwa changchop simbi ki nyamle changchop simbi kita joba wa tindi ji be nge tar chimba ji yung
So the first part of this is sort of this aspiration to perfect the practices of a bodhisattva. So this is, the aspiration to bring the two types of relative bodhicitta, the aspiration bodhicitta and application bodhicitta, to perfection, and to train in the practice of the six perfections, not just to train in the practice, but to really bring that practice to complete perfection, to be able to fully develop the conduct and mind state of the bodhisattva to its fullest possible potential. And this also includes the different levels of bodhicitta intention or aspiration. For instance, the king-like bodhicitta aspiration, the captain of a ship-like bodhicitta aspiration, and the shepherd-like bodhicitta aspiration. So this includes all of these different levels of bodhicitta intention together with the corresponding conduct.
That's a nipadri. Simtian dark jutong, tumbanjo, zone. Simtian dark is on Tayang to near Kitty, Simtian Himbala, Penatoya. Telayanta, and something to Jig Samba Sambo, not so going to Samba Sambo Chivi in a yang, ko Parjo Teleyan, ko Hamago Chine, ko Samba Sambo in Hako Marwa. Tinu Parjok, ko Jobaji, Katan Kont Huimba. Tinichi pena not only gave a drop labina, ko give a drop, Koran Pengerwa. Yina yang ko give a drop labi kavla, Penacha Havina, Katan Sanji, Kison, Penach Mijil, Tutem Yabo Mivina, Tininchi miniature, Tutem Yabo Mendos, 수점 송 거리세요. 라베 히라 요 말이 정도와 이니야 파르조 좁아다 튠바지 다 들리지 게 느바지 랩쇼 송래 당가서 참랭 가서 느바 요 말와 느바 메디 테니 가서지 학산 남다 개간에 랍고 요래 테니야 고 파르조 랍세 유틸라 테니 고나만 로 말와 나와 만도나 고 파르조 유틸 팽게 말와 딘디 마임바 테니지 파르조 키 유틸라 뚜네 파르조 테고 다 딘디 리샤 somebody 코랑 클로지 랩치고 맞고 그 랍샤 와텔라 텔로그도 하다 제당하죠 단들이 고려와 심전 남지 삼바탕 세야지도와 로이 치다 제다와 세야와 딘디제 게 토는 게 지금 몽방 같은 느파지 랩쇼 송 계시다는 느파 메베가라 또 맞고지 삼바 상상도 지기 요리 이나양 고파죠 유티게 그 힘바제 코로 그러와 하고요 말이 딘디 고파죠 유티 편 통말와 딘디다 딘디 많이 봐. 근데 지금 파죠 그 유텔라 튠비 거네. 나도 지금 장조 선비 라바 칸디스 라고 고요나. 나도 딘디게 똥토고스.
So as it says, may or another actually a different an alternative reading here is so may I bring enlightened action to perfection and serve beings so as to suit their needs. Or here it says acting in harmony with the various dispositions of beings. So it can be, the case that sometimes we have good intentions, we have pure intentions. Our intentions are good, but then things are not understood. Like the recipient of our intentions, distorts what we are intending, or it isn't received as it is intended, on the part of the person who has a certain, pure intention, but then is not able to necessarily accomplish, the purpose of others according to their intentions. Or for example, we had spoken about before that it really takes skillful means to be able to accomplish the benefit of beings. So for instance, it is rarely the case that, say for instance, if you take the example of somebody who has, kind of faulty conduct, that their conduct is not very good, and then if you address that person and say, you really need to change your conduct,
or maybe it's the benefit conduct, benefit more ethics, to make it allow your maris. 레이트니 주템베 종고그레 주템종의 펜도온데 요레 히달라 고마
So if we lecture them on the benefits of keeping ethical discipline, and say like it's really important to have good conduct, it's really important to practice ethical discipline, and then we lecture them in this way, very rarely is that advice, kind of graciously received. If any, sometimes it can even have the opposite effect. And so even but there are a lot of other ways to influence that person. So we, instead of say addressing, that particular topic of ethical discipline, then maybe we can sort of talk about generosity, the benefits of generosity, or developing love and compassion and so forth. And so until one is at a certain level, we don't really, even though we may have the intention to benefit others, the capacity might not really be there. And even even if we try, it may not land with the person that we are trying to benefit in the way that we had intended for it to land. And so it may end up being that, that our actions actually end up not being so helpful or beneficial. And so that is, for instance, when we recite the prayer at the beginning of the teachings where we say, please turn the wheel of the Dharma according to the dispositions and likewise the mental capacities of sentient beings. So this is that same aspiration, that even though we may have the intention now, we don't have the skill and the power and the ability to really truly achieve the benefit of beings. And so this aspiration to, that may this power and ability develop, may we develop the power and ability to be able to skillfully achieve the benefit of beings according to their needs and dispositions, is very important. This is a really important aspiration to make. So because again, we might have the intention, but there are so many sort of conditions that are needed to actually be able to achieve the benefit of others based on that intention in a way that is truly helpful and skillful, in a way that is able to really beneficially affect the recipient.
근데 제가 나이 다 상보주 봐 랍도 돈이 소다 텐드 다 단기 공투와 이르지 있으면 강라 강두케 고네 되는 상보주 비기다 아 줘봐 아 차창만지 그러와 랍도 초도 되니 되니 심지어 힘발이 똥 터버리고
And so then as it says, acting in harmony, so may I practice showing the ways of a bodhisattva, or here as it says, I shall bring enlightened action to perfection, serve beings so as to suit their needs, teach them to accomplish good actions, and continue this throughout all eons to come. So here the aspiration is to be able to achieve the vast benefit of sentient beings according to their needs and dispositions, and to bring them onto the path of excellent conduct, of pure conduct. Or may I exhibit the Rabtu Tun, the
랍도 돈이
wrong.
말이 다 녜크더니 똥 터표스 라보다디 랍즈디지 랍즈는 초도 주로 하라고 초도 주로 차창마지 되네 똥 터표스 다 동야 대양한테 직 투수 제와 직도 많이 봐 제와 니도 많이 봐아다 딘디 많이 봐 되네 직 뭐니 개박군도 줄이 간다 심지어 다 맞아지 봐도 개반데 맞아지 봐도 개한테 뭐도 뭐 개와 간디 요비나 개와 가시 요비나 더 잠징에 되네 똥 터표스
And so it is, the aspiration is to teach them, or it's actually to excellently, really completely show them, or excellently show them or teach them this, to accomplish good actions. It says here to engage in noble conduct. And may I continue this throughout all eons to come. So this isn't just like for one or two lives, but this aspiration is truly vast, it's this, like with regard to the scope of time, really for kalpas, for however long it takes, for kalpas, eons, infinite or endless eons, without or eons without end.
tinda kita ngaso karba labiasa marwa 다 가장엘라 임바 투투 단기 공슈와 나이리 투투 링탈라 티 가르센 투투
식치나 산인와나 약사마레베 가인츠나 나송무마 토기야 여러와 드니다 타요 말와
텐사리 정도니
okay.
하나 제발만
All right.
이나 제타다 당길라 임바 가서지 자체쇼데 당기 휴바레스 자체쇼데 가레스 라비나 드네 현감 자체쇼레스 아 드네 다 자충쇼데 가장 가서지 대지사 임바 가레데 다 대기 차서
Dume chame. Chame
너
dume.
와 이나 다 람바 힌자 그러와 니제르두 드네 랑
Right.
랑크두 lokdu zwonkdu tene chuidu tene jakdu tene dunten chami se pe ta tanga ji yo sarwa ka sa ni se long lo zwon chu ja du dunten chami wo ji yores odate chungro no ji res
So we talked some, or we spoke some about these different sort of measurements of space, or what kind of the largest unit of space is this vast Buddha field, and then the smallest unit of the space is a like this partless particle or indivisible particle. And we also talked about these different types of particles that are kind of divided by 7, and so they become smaller and smaller, and there are 8 of them. And so one is the first is like the particles of dust in a ray of sunlight, and then there's what's referred to as these elephant particles, and then not elephant, cow.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, cow particles, and then sheep particles, and then rabbit particles, water particles, metal particles, and then kind of particles or atoms, and then partless particles or indivisible atoms.
I forget.
Right. So these are all
divisions 7 times
divided, in sort of units of down into units of 7. So each one is divided by 7. So for instance, one of these particles in the ray, or sun particles, or particles of dust in the ray of sun, when divided into 7, then each of those 7 particles become a cow particle.
Tene tega na yita tanga to karbat chiglab insta je chinang yang cho soni lab go na chosares. Hinta karba seyati ta karse gore tusu ta ti tusu ringbo se na karba lab go wa karba tres.
So then also he was going to get into kind of how to understand what is meant by a kalpa. So first of all, when we talk a lot about kalpas, or sometimes we translate this as eon in English, and it is thought of, generally it is used to mean a very long period of time.
In ta karba sidu ketan karba seyala telatini karba tela karba che zeyatela tinala karba chungjung tini yorwa tindi kwarke tindi tini kar tindi ta thambo tela karba tela labyosa karba chaba karba neba karba jegba karba tomba seyatela tindi jegla tini ta karchens na karba jegla kres.
And within the period of a kalpa, there are what are referred to as intermediate kalpas. So actually in the period of one great kalpa, so one great kalpa has four sort of stages. There's this stage of development. There's this stage of like abiding, or the abiding duration of the kalpa. There's a stage of destruction, and then there is a stage of just emptiness, or emptying out, having been emptied out.
다 레레라 파케 니슈 니슈랍 그레스라.
And in each of these four stages, there are 20 intermediate kalpas.
테니 깔바지글라 카리어스나. 테니 깔바차라 파케 니슈, 깔바 똥발라 파케 니슈, 깔바 네발라 파케 니슈. 테니 똥발라 파케 니슈 지리다 파케 자치요레스.
So in other words, then there are 80 intermediate kalpas within the time span of one great kalpa, because there are 20 intermediate kalpas in this stage of development, 20 intermediate kalpas in the stage of duration, 20 intermediate kalpas in the stage of destruction, and 20 intermediate kalpas in the stage of having been emptied out.
다 뒤에 땅에서 장가대 갈지고 그래서나 다 밝힌 이슈서야지 다 요르와 개반이 듣지나 되네 그 참마대 그 듀레이션도 오데 집어차도 요레스.
Wait, 근데?
밝힌 이슈서 제가 하고나 되네 참마 집어라와 야치대. 밝힌 이슈라 임바 오케이 까르와 제가 까르와 차블라 밝힌 이슈 요레 라우와 집어지 장 요르와 차블라 이슈 네발라 이슈 동발라 이슈 요르와 다 당보된 거 좀 차샤비나 밝힌 이슈서야 된 것도 딱 무슨고 그래서.
Okay. So once you understand the sort of the course of these 20 intermediate kalpas in one stage, it's actually the same in all of the stages. So there are these 20 intermediate kalpas in each of these four stages, making a total of 80. But the sort of the progression of these intermediate kalpas is the same in each stage.
다 뒤인도 다 가서 될라 간다인다 쓴다 다 밝힌 이슈서야 될라 되네 마토링 모스디 마용야 제치.
Well, maybe we'll draw a diagram.
Yeah. We did before, but maybe like that. 다 데라 지디 야토링 모지디 단 데네 마용 거와 데네 마용 데 팔라 야토링 몰라 그레스 지
So dampo marne yardo gere, dampo yardo mardo gere.
다 마용 데라 칠로 제트 마용 거와 데네 단 데지 볼라 찍지 그레스 지 데네 디아카블라 코파 줍지 지디 단데 코파레 찍그레스 코파니 코과송 지디 코코 그래요 코코 데네 데라 줍지 요레스 데레 찍지디 데네 쭈르그루한테 찍지디 니시로와.
Okay, so I guess we'll have to see if we can see here.
I can't hear them.
Okay. Okay, so at the at the beginning of the kalpa, which it actually starts with the peak, and then there's a period of decrease. So that period of decrease is kind of like its own thing, and then from that point, then there's period of increase, and as you see, there are all of these kind of peaks and valleys. So each of the sort of the what he said literally was kind of like the stomach in each of the kind of mountains, meaning here and then here and then here and then here, all the way to the end. So on the end, there's again another period of decrease, which is also its own thing. So the period of decrease at the beginning and the period of decrease at the end are set apart as two. So there are these 18, there's 18 and then 2.
Tinita Tilla Natota Bena Chawina Garba Cha Alabda Bena Garba Charm Chabanda, which is some Tamina. Tine that Garba Chadu Garba Chaneta Tangi Contu and Harkin Yikungo Yorwa. In Tati Tanganisi, Himbalam Duxat. That dealer Tangatsuti, Tambo Ziji Jalins. In a Garba Chane, Kanen go to Gudesana, Tine Garba Chane, Tine Celopami, Seaji Yores, Tezigmaris. In a Kadun go to Gudelavina, Tine Celo Jetla, Tine go to Grace.
So when the kalpas begin, or when there's the sort of during the for instance, the kalpa or the period of duration, then the intermediate kalpas, these 20 intermediate kalpas start off when the lifespan of beings is 80,000 years.
That 80,000 Lavina Tanga to the cheek, no down, not you simply some chat there one, that carbon goes over no is.
And that's really like at the very beginning, everything has been formed, like the outer container that is the universe, the environment, and the contents, the beings therein, are all fully formed.
That's hello Jejane, not hello Jetane, Tama trigger on you. Tene lo Jatambe Nana, logic triggers.
And so what happens is that from this time period where the lifespan of beings is 80,000 years, it starts to decrease. So we're going into a period of decrease from this kind of period of peak, where the lifespan of beings increase or decreases by 1 year every 100 years.
That indeed decrease and get shabby. 80,000 that's a lot of progress.
And so that one period of decreases at the same rate or the same sort of ratio of minus 1 year every 100 years until it gets sort of to the peak of decrease, which is the 10, where the lifespan of beings is 10 years, that, where it's beings live for only 10 years.
That indeed, Chine, that telecarsana go yatoring most jigger. Tine yarn over this young, Artselu Chubane, Hajipajikan progress, 100 years, increasing 1 year chagua.
And then from that point, then it moves into a period of increase where, again, the lifespan of beings starts to increase in the same way. So by 1 year, every 100 years, from 10 years up to 80,000 again. And so this is how it goes, in periods of increase and periods of decrease, up and down like that for 18 peaks and valleys.
in the class the tirawa the kasa ya talking about ma talking about 20 chagoris.
And then the two on the end, which are like the yarto ringwa.
Yeah. Ya the man la.
Oh, actually, yeah. So the periods on either end of increase and decrease on either end, which make 20, so 18 plus 2.
What that look at you now, or that tender with JK. Then that not a logic. I don't remember how many years, but people can.
Yeah.
So
actually, he.
But now we.
Young Dingamandu Kare Siga.
What that Chapamando, Fiji Jabi or Natati, Jetanti Jacho Rock on the Lila Warwa.
So he did sort of calculate it all out, but then we don't have the numbers anymore.
But that is not that difficult. So we get everybody very well in the mathematics. So, but the easy way is, so this either way up and down is like every 100 years, or whether 1 year increasing or whether 1 year decreasing. So then this down, and then this up and down, up and down, up and down 80 times, and then up, so 20 times. So how many years? That is we call
how long? Yeah.
How many years? So that is called like a intermediate. What
one intermediate.
Well,
I thought these were intermediate.
That tender with JK, that tender with Jachundo Google is.
So then there are 20 of these like that.
So that's total the low is.
And that's the number of years once you calculate that out.
So that's I think, but still we can keep going next Sunday. I think also when the distractions, how many distractions, up to I think we call something.
Distraction up to the second realm of meditative absorption. So this gives you an idea of like what's really meant when we say a kalpa, that it means, it's meant to mean a very long period of time, and is indeed a very long period of time.
Okay, so then we can stop here today.
So there was a question in the chat from Soleil Archer. He was asking if the 7-branch prayer, is that an aspiration prayer?
Yes. Aspiration prayer? 7-branch in Tinala, Carsenata, Japandi, Samboju Kuntoris. Yina yang ko koran la ta de chen ka chang hyuin ba chi choba puya da ka san de ko 7 branch yorwa yina yang ya da basically consult chwa tin sarwa re ta te re la sanju kunto res
or zangchu rang la gyo mare che tang den da de yin lag dung ba den da de mon lam yin ba la tu gyo re be mon lam re be
mon lam do ha
yes it's an aspiration prayer.
Ina kota nang se dis ko ka yorwa ina teri monam bela.
But the like the divisions are a little bit, there's variation with regard to the divisions, but it is an aspiration prayer, yes. Dini di zangchu nangla di changare la bayana na chira yaboko masang.
So there's a couple more questions. Is that okay to ask now?
Okay.
Yeah. So Peter was asking if in the aspiration prayer of Samanta Vajra, it says co-emergent ignorance is distracted, unaware consciousness. thoroughly conceptualizing ignorance is to grasp at self and other as two, the two types of ignorance, co-emergent and thoroughly conceptualizing, are the basis of all sentient one's confusion. Could you please speak a little bit on these two ignorances? Thank you, Rinpoche.
So the kuntu zambo mo namirwa tini the re de rinpoche kare la gogi re bukela flinchi chebe marikpa de
kundu tobe mareba
kuntu tobe
tendo jutanti
marikpa dang I'm sorry, it's just difficult to remember what this is in Tibetan offhand. If we can look at the Tibetan, it would be helpful. I think we had it.
I can share my screen with the Tibetan if you give me that ability.
Yeah, that would be great. Oh, I would need to make you. Let's see.
No, I can do it. I have the right. Hold on.
Mhm. I thought it was in the beginning. Oh, there it is. Okay.
jibi mareba
Linchi chibe marikba sheba dim me ying ba yin kuntu tape marikba da shin nisu zimba yin linchi kunta marikba ni so dini ge de marikba ge rigni sungiyorawa and di ge marikba
lenchi jibi mareba shepa timi
Can you make it a little bigger,
that's okay, I
James?
shepa timi yang bai shepa timi yang bai
That get bigger?
yeah kundu tape mareba da yin ni sun sin bai
Ina yang di ni yorawa di linchi chibe marikba laukio mare linchi chibe marikba nangla ni yorawa kuntu tape marikba dang linchi kuntu tape marikba ni.
lenchi jibi mareba shepa timi yang bai kundu tape mareba da yin ni sun sin bai
Oh no, di linchi chibe marikba dang kuntu tape marikba ni yosare.
dine lenchi kunta marek ni simchen kunji tuji te korang tanda di insar wa de kundu tape marek ba tan lenchi jibi marek ba la ku yosaris
Right. Ina yang di ni kande do da laukio sarawa.
ta thang thela
Ina yang di lap sarware inchi kila lap sarware. Kuntu tape marikba. Yeah, so these two types of ignorance, the co-emergent ignorance, and I forgot how you said it in your question, but designating unawareness is what it is here. And actually, it kind of explains exactly what it is there. Linchi chepe marikba. De linchi chepe marikba shepa drimme yingba yin yingwa yin.
다 지탄 코란이 가르치는 틴다 위저리 다 가르치는 것도 다 지탄 마렉바 요르와 마렉바 텔라 아티는 추니 티는 가서 지탄 칸자크다 세야데 추지다 세 닌진도도와 오다 코란이 본체 힌도지 티니 용구요사레스 당보 마렉바 코란라 아이 리티네야 고 마렉바 렌치 기비 마렉바다 마렉바 세나리 가서 데려와 이나 티 마렉바 텔라 때네 tiene nga so chi kun ta ba sena ta chu ji da se ji pen ni on bon nga la so ta tin do ji ko ku sa res
So essentially, there's sort of like the fundamental ignorance, which is the co-emergent ignorance here. Co-emergent ignorance, which is this distracted, unaware consciousness. And then from that, there arises dualistic grasping, concepts of self and other. So we endow, this selfhood with some identity of like the individual of the self, and we identify other with some identity, endowing them sort of with the selfhood of phenomena. So this second type of ignorance, which is sometimes translated as imputing unawareness or imputing ignorance. And here it says, what does it say?
Imaginative unawareness.
Okay, that's an interesting term. So that is referring to the ignorance of dualistic grasping, the ignorance that endows, a selfhood to the individual and a selfhood to phenomena.
제가 나기다 지탄 가서 현지 기비 말에 봐 zonda 가서 말에 봐 티어 봐 이나 말에 봐 코랑 오도 섬 땅비나 티네 직다 가서 그지 파를 니에 원다고 지 용거로 봐 이나야다 말에 비기 짠지 야 랑비 까라 티네 다다 세야지 현세야 인진로 그래스
So
티니 보디 다다 현세야디 Terus tunggu beta amco na cik yang nyam telek yung gres cek ngul yung jili yung kumaris.
Wait, ganda?
Te ta amco sarwa na cik ya tsar gres.
Tagi amco nangsin. Horse ears?
Yes.
Tagi amco nangsin.
Okay, this.
하고서.
Oh, tena dagen di rawa.
So the co-emergent ignorance is also it says in the same prayer, there comes a sort of a fainting away, a sudden fainting away, and then the arising of this designation of self and others, which is this imputing unawareness or imputing ignorance that is essentially referring to dualistic grasping. So there's apprehension of self and other, and these two, the co-emergent ignorance and the imputing ignorance, are like the two ears of a horse. They grow together. They're sort of like parallel with one another.
The dualistic concept,
with and then this is sort of the foundation of dualistic concepts.
Your dedication.
Oh, thoroughly conceptualizing ignorance. That's what it was. Sorry. That was the translation. It was thoroughly conceptualizing ignorance or imputing ignorance. Yeah, thoroughly conceptualizing is good.
I think James had a question too.
Oh, Rinpoche, can I ask one quick question?
Okay.
When you taught on verse 21 of the King of Aspirations, you said, ordinarily our self-interest is something that creates negativity. And then through this aspiration prayer, we're taking the fixation of the self and we're skillfully replacing it with the aspiration prayer. I wonder, is this what is meant in the Gongchig? It's 422 where he says grasping at a self and accumulating merit. That's the meaning. Okay.
Absolutely right. So the dad son tsosa tamki his dad and zigore son do. Yes, absolutely.
That's exactly what is being referred to there.
Thank
What is the, maybe you can read the Vajra statement in English?
Yeah, it says people claim that self-grasping is to be abandoned since one passes beyond samsara due to the absence of self-grasping. And then the Vajra statement is to deliberately grasp a self and to gather the accumulations is a skillful means. Thank you, Rinpoche.
So we're going to your dedication.
So page 24 in the prayer book. By the virtues collected in the 3 times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate root of virtue, may I and all beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Dragungpa Ratna Shri, who is omniscient, Lord of the Dharma, Master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara.
Thank you. Have a good day.